Hello, I'm John. I'm on board Corrick. We're currently very broad reaching back towards Portsmouth. Heads still only, all very comfortable and very lovely. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the role of the lookout. It's much unsung, but pretty important. The number of times I've been on a boat when somebody said, "Where has that super tanker appeared from?" Just a bit too many to be comfortable. I hope you enjoy this video. I think it's rule 5, in fact it definitely is rule 5, which says that you need to keep a good lookout at all times. And certainly the comp crew courses and the stuff we do with any sort of training, there is that role of the lookout, but there isn't much guidance beyond that in terms of how and what to do. We've got a little bit of a routine that I think is, it works for me, it's what I teach, and actually it works really well for children. It gets them a little bit involved in a job that does genuinely need to be done. So I'm redoing this bit. I'm afraid to say the wind noise when we took this when we were sailing was just a bit too much. But what I was saying was there's initially 3 things to report. What relative bearing are you looking down? How far away are you looking for it? What is it? And then as that gets a bit better, what is the other thing doing? And what are we going to do if we have a duty to keep out the way, or we think it's a hazard that we need to avoid? And so you might be sitting in the cockpit and you would look up and you would say red or green, depending on whether it was on the port or starboard side. And then the relative bearing 10, 20, 40, 60, 150 degrees. How far away is it? I tend to measure these things in yards, but that's entirely up to you. And then what is it? Is it a fishing boat? Is it a yacht? Is it a small super tanker? And then what is it doing? Its bearing is drawing right. If it's on the starboard side, that's good. If it's on the starboard side and the bearing is drawing left, that means it's crossing. That is something that you then need to start looking at in a little bit more detail. So just going back. Relative bearing, what range, what is it, what's it doing, what's going to happen next. Sorry, one of the things I will say, and didn't mean to cut across you there, but I'll show you it later, is the relative bearings are really important because that's what you've got to hand in the cockpit at night. And when you're not certain, that's the time to reach for your hand bearing compass and start to take true bearings, because that is the real truth. The relative bearings alter when you alter. An example that we have here at the moment is at about red 60, range of about 1,000 yards. There is a sailing vessel, in fact there are 2 sailing vessels. They're both on the same tack as us. We're the giveaway vessel because we are the windward boat, and that's the sort of thing that that paints a picture down to the skipper, who doesn't necessarily now need to stick his head up above into the cockpit. He knows that the lookout or the helmsman has seen something and knows the responsibility. Just to reiterate this a little bit, the relative bearings are relative to the boat as seen from above. So think about where your normal lookout position is, sitting on the helm in the cockpit. Clearly right ahead and right astern are fairly straightforward, straight through the mast, straight through the backstay. Over onto the starboard side, green 90 is right on the beam, and I think of that as straight through the winch. Going forward, green 60 is 60 degrees off the bow, and then going further forward again, what you would then have is green 30 and green 20 and green 10, and I line these up exactly with the stanchions, which are very conveniently placed. So it looks like that as you look down the starboard side, all the way from right ahead to green 90 through the various relative angles. On the port side, similarly the same is true. I haven't concentrated too much looking abaft the beam, as it's not so important. But what we've then got is an easy way to see this is just to remind yourself by looking at where the wind indicator is, and there's the very helpful colours and the angles there for ready reference. So if you can convert what you can see on the wind indicator to the stanchions, you've got the relative bearings. When the time comes at night, it's a really good idea to be able to take a hand bearing compass of all of these, and it's a good idea to practice that in the daylight.
It's probably worth looking at a few examples. So here is very fine on the starboard bow, very small tanker, 6,000 yards away, but he's going to pass quite close and it's going to be quite quick because he's coming straight towards. Good idea to keep an eye on him, more important than the yacht heading the same direction. What I would say is always when you see these ships, and if they do appear on AIS, spend a little bit of time plotting them on the AIS and looking at what the range is and how it closes, and give yourself those ready references. Also, though, be very careful to keep an eye underneath your own head sail. It's too easy to forget about that small yacht coming straight towards here, also going to pass close. In the Solent, always keep an eye out for ferries and always look over your shoulder because there's one behind you. This is the tanker we saw earlier getting a little bit closer, obviously passing clear, but it's going to be reasonably close, but worth keeping an eye on. And again, always go back to your plotter.
I think I'm a lot more confident being on watch or the only person on deck, or even when we're doing a night passage, than I was just a few months ago. The routine that we have for reporting helps me to assess what's going on around us, understand what ships and navigation marks are actually important, and being able to communicate this effectively with John about the distance, the bearing, what it's going to do, what is it, and and sometimes I will suggest that we alter course gently. This has been quite important when John has been down below dozing, which you do quite often, or is doing some navigation work. And I say I feel a lot more confident using this method, and it's made me understand, a lot more of what's going on around me.
Yeah, it's a good little routine to get into. I hope that was useful. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.